I have a lot of fond memories with Disney growing up, whether it's Walt Disney Animation Studios, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars. A lot of those films have been some of my favorites of all time, whether it's exploring real people emotions, like in Inside Out, or exploring life purpose in the movie Soul, and in certain Marvel films just having long, very complex but very satisfying conclusions to long-running series such as The Avengers. However, most of the time as of late, Disney has become very stagnant. And stagnant basically means that they have become content with mediocrity, in a way. And there are several big reasons why this is the case, and I'd like to explain them to you today, such as their abundance of remakes and sequels, their retreading of past films leading to a lot of repetition, and their insistence on moment chasing to make the big bucks. The first thing I want to emphasize is their emphasis on remakes and sequels. They have pumped out a total of 9 live-action remakes since the release of Maleficent in 2014. Almost all of them have been critically received as not as good as the originals. And they outnumber original works very much as far as Disney's output of films and television and such. And this is a problem because it's because of later points I'll be mentioning, but these points that are big problems with Disney's latest films are much, much less likely to happen in original films rather than remakes, or the other thing I want to mention, sequels. Their sequels have, in particular, are just usually very weak outings. They do a lot of the second point here, which is retreading. I'll get to that in a moment. But remakes in particular they're very successful, sadly, is the truth of it. They are very popular, even despite not being as well as critically received. But Lion King in particular, that remake, is one of the highest grossing films of all time. It's in the top 10, I believe. And so Disney has no intention on stopping that anytime soon. They have no incentive to, because it's more successful, to remake past things to continue being successful and keep their business afloat, in a way. As for the second main point, though, that I want to emphasize is retreading past films. What this basically means is that they retread a lot of past plot points or characters, and as a result, just make their films feel very repetitive. And so when Disney's releasing 3 or 4 films each year and you start seeing the same plot lines over and over again, or the same type of characters over and over again, it starts to become stale and stagnant. And I mention sequels here because it's very common when you're retreading, or it's very common in sequels to retread. One common example is in sequels, a lot of the times you'll see a character who has a love interest trying to confess their feelings for them. That's a very common plotline given to characters who don't usually have much to do in the sequels because the sequels weren't planned. The original films were so successful that they decided to make sequels, but the creators never envisioned that they would actually get sequels. Incredibles 2 in particular is probably the biggest offender of this. They do a lot of retreading of the original film. Some lines are the exact same, some plot lines are the exact same, and it's at the detriment of the film because sometimes in the instance of, say, Mr. Incredible in particular, it goes back on his character development of being okay with being a family man, and the second film emphasizes that he has a problem with that all over again, and it hurts the first film in the process of retreading past films. It hurts those past films, and yet it was still super successful, so they have no reason not to do it. But their biggest problem is their moment chasing. Moment chasing is when a part of a film relies on prior knowledge of other franchises or films. So a big example of this can be found in remakes. The Lion King, for example, when Mufasa dies, that is a very common scene from the original film that a lot of people remember, and so they capture it in almost the exact same way, like cinematography-wise, in the exact same way it was done originally, as to remind people of that moment and to gauge their interest. And that is an example of moment chasing. But there's a problem when it comes to moment chasing, and that is that if you have too much of it in a film, which happens a lot in remakes and a lot in sequels as well, you run into the problem of making the rest of your movie feel stale by comparison. For example, can you think of any non-iconic moment from the Lion King remake, for example, that you can actually remember? Like, is there any scenes that weren't in the original film in the remake that you actually remember or liked? Most people would probably say no. I know I would. And so that is an example of a big problem with it, because it harms the outlook of the films in general. But at the end of the day, it's more successful. So what's the problem? Who cares? They're making a business. Well, Disney is one of the biggest film companies in the world. They own a lot of different companies and a lot of different franchises, and so a lot of other companies tend to look up to what they're doing. Disney Plus, for example, as soon as that came out, I'm pretty sure HBO Max started to become very prominent and eventually came out as well to combat it in a way. And by doing that, HBO has started to release their films a bit more quickly, and that could be harming the films in particular. But when it comes to Disney in particular, they're basically, all eyes are on Disney when it comes to film. And so a lot of other production companies watch Disney for what they do, and they do what they do. And so that's a problem because Disney does a lot of moment chasing, retreading, and remaking stuff all for the sake of business. And by doing all this, you're losing creative control in a way because you're not emphasizing creative works and actual unique storytelling to further drive the film industry. Instead, you are keeping the film industry stagnant by promoting big business and success over creating an actual work of art. And so in conclusion, Disney needs to change. They are fine. None of their films are like exceptionally bad, but what they're doing right now is going to ensure that other film companies follow suit, and that is not a good thing. Because the more remakes sequels we get, the more retreading of past films we have, and the more moment chasing there is in all types of films, the more likely we are to see the film industry as a whole become stagnant. Thank you.